The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the burning city of Valthara. Elder Kale pressed his back against the cold crystal wall and tried to control his breathing. His natural glow, which had once shone bright blue with contentment, now flickered dim orange with fear and exhaustion. Through the broken window above his head, he could hear the heavy boots of Vorthon soldiers marching through what used to be the peaceful streets of his home. The sound made his skin crawl. 3 months ago, those same streets had been filled with the gentle songs of his people and the laughter of children. Now there was only silence, broken by the occasional scream from the labor camps. Kale closed his eyes and remembered the day the Vorthons arrived. Their massive black ships had appeared without warning, blocking out the light of both suns. The Zelani Council had tried to communicate, offering trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They had always solved problems through talking and friendship. It had worked for thousands of years, but the Vorthons did not want to talk. They wanted slaves. The attack came fast and brutal. The Zelani had no real weapons, no armies, no way to fight back against beings who saw violence as the solution to everything. Within hours, their beautiful crystal cities were in ruins. Within days, most of the population was in chains. Kyle opened his eyes and looked around the small underground cave where the last free members of the Zelani Council were hiding. There were only 12 of them left out of the original 100. The others were dead or captured. The cave was cold and damp, nothing like the warm, light-filled chambers where they used to meet. "Elder," whispered Nira, the youngest member of their group. Her skin patterns flickered nervously as she crawled closer. "The scouts report that the Vorthons are planning something big. They are gathering more ships in orbit." Kale nodded sadly. He had feared this would happen. The Vorthons were not content with just enslaving his people. They wanted to strip the planet of all its resources before moving on to destroy other worlds. "How many of our people are left free?" he asked. "Maybe a few thousand scattered in caves and ruins across the planet," Nira replied. "But Elder, we cannot fight them. We do not know how. We were never meant for war." Kyle stood slowly, his old joints protesting. His people had always been proud of their peaceful nature. They had built a civilization based on art, science, and harmony with nature. They had never needed to learn the ways of violence, now that peaceful nature was killing them. "There must be something we can do," he said, more to himself than to the others. "Someone who can help us." That was when Counselor Veth spoke up. He was even older than Kale, his skin permanently dimmed by age and sorrow. "Elder, I have been thinking about the old stories, the tales that traders bring from distant worlds." Kale turned to look at him. "What stories?" "Stories about a species called humans. They say these beings come from a world so dangerous that just surviving there makes them into warriors. They call it a death world." Veth's voice grew stronger as he continued. "The stories say humans are small but fierce, that they fight not just for themselves, but for others who cannot fight." Nira's patterns flickered with hope. "Are these stories true?" "I do not know," Veth admitted. "But the traders who tell them speak with fear and respect. They say humans are different from other species, that they have something called compassion mixed with their strength." Kyle felt something stirring in his chest. It was small and fragile, but it was hope. "Where do these humans live? How far away?" "The traders speak of systems beyond the Vorthon Empire, worlds where the humans have built their own civilization." "But Elder," Veth's voice grew worried, "even if the stories are true, why would they help us? We have nothing to offer them." Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Above them, he could hear the rumble of Vorthon transport ships loading another group of his people for the labor camps. Soon, there would be none left to save. "Because," he said finally, "if the stories are true, then humans understand what it means to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We must try." The others looked uncertain. They had no way to send messages beyond their own system. The Vorthons controlled all communication arrays. But Kyle remembered something from his younger days when he had studied ancient technology. The Old emergency beacon, he said suddenly. In the ruins of the Central Archive. It was built to send messages across the galaxy in case of disasters. Elder, Nira said gently, that beacon has not worked in centuries. Then we must make it work, Kale replied with more determination than he had felt in months. It is our only chance. The journey to the ruined archive took 2 days of careful movement through the destroyed city. The Vorthans had patrols everywhere, their red armor gleaming like blood in the sunlight. Twice the small group had to hide while soldiers passed by, dragging chains of Zelani prisoners behind them. The Central Archive had once been the most beautiful building on their world. Its crystal towers had reached toward the sky like frozen music, filled with the knowledge and art of countless generations. Now it was a broken shell, its towers shattered and its halls empty. But deep in the basement, they found what they were looking for. The emergency beacon was old and covered in dust, but the crystal core still hummed with faint energy. Kyle ran his hands over the control panels, remembering lessons from his youth. I can make it work, he said, after examining the ancient machine, but I will only have enough power for one message. It will have to be broadcast on all frequencies and hope that someone is listening. The others gathered around as Kale powered up the beacon. The crystal core began to glow brighter, casting blue light on their worried faces. He positioned himself in front of the communication array and took a deep breath. This is Elder Kale of the Zelani Council on Kepler 442b, he began, his voice steady despite his fear. We are under attack by the Vorthon Empire. Our people are being enslaved and our world is being destroyed. We are a peaceful species with no weapons and no way to defend ourselves. He paused, thinking of his people suffering in the camps above. We have heard stories of a species called humans, warriors from a death world called Earth. If such beings exist, if there are those who fight not just for themselves but for others, we beg for your aid. Our civilization is dying. Our children are being taken from us. We have tried to resist with peaceful means, but peaceful means cannot stop those who choose violence. The beacon's power was already fading. Kyle spoke faster, putting all his hope into the words. Please, any who receive this message, we are not asking you to die for us. We are asking you to help us live, to help us save what remains of our people and our world. We can offer little in return except our gratitude and our promise to never forget such kindness. This is Elder Kale of the Zelani. We pray that somewhere in the darkness of space, someone with the strength to help is listening. The beacon's light flickered and died. The message was sent, racing through hyperspace toward distant stars and unknown worlds. Now all they could do was wait and hope that the stories about humans were true, and that somewhere among the stars, the Deathworlders were listening. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant, staring at the star chart displayed on the main screen. The ship was 3 days out from Earth's outer colonies, conducting a routine patrol of the frontier systems. It was supposed to be a quiet mission, the kind that let her crew rest between the more dangerous assignments. That changed when Lieutenant Jake Thompson looked up from his communication station with a puzzled expression. Captain, we are picking up something strange, he said, adjusting his headset. It is a wideband transmission from outside our normal patrol zone. The signal is weak, but it is using Galactic standard frequencies. Lisa walked over to Jake's station. In her 5 years commanding the Valiant, she had learned to pay attention when her communications officer looked confused. Jake had been doing this job longer than most, and he rarely got puzzled by routine traffic. What kind of transmission? She asked. It sounds like a distress call, ma'am, but the language pattern is not familiar. The computer is running it through universal translation protocols now. Jake pressed a few buttons on his console. The signal originated from a system called Kepler 442b. That is way outside our usual patrol area. How far outside? About 2 weeks jump time from here, assuming we push the engines. It is in a sector that borders Vorthon space. Lisa felt her stomach tighten at the mention of the Vorthons. The Vorthon Empire had been expanding for decades, swallowing up smaller civilizations and turning them into slave worlds. Humanity had managed to avoid direct conflict with them so far, but everyone in the fleet knew it was only a matter of time. Have you got the translation yet? Jake nodded and pressed another button. The bridge filled with the sound of an alien voice speaking in accented but clear English. The voice was old and tired, filled with a sadness that made everyone on the bridge stop what they were doing to listen. This is Elder Kale of the Zelani Council on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by the Vorthon Empire. Our people are being enslaved and our world is being destroyed. We are a peaceful species with no weapons and no way to defend ourselves. Lisa exchanged glances with her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis. Sarah had fought in the border conflicts with the hegemony 5 years ago. She knew what it meant when peaceful worlds got caught between warring powers. The message continued. We have heard stories of a species called humans, warriors from a death world called Earth. If such beings exist, if there are those who fight, not just for themselves but for others, we beg for your aid. When the message ended, the bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Lisa looked around at her crew. These were good people, men and women who had joined the Earth fleet to protect humanity's colonies and trade routes, but she could see in their faces the same thing she was feeling. This was not about protecting human interests. This was about doing what was right. Ma'am, Jake said quietly. What do we do? Lisa stared at the star chart for a long moment. Standard procedure would be to report the message to Fleet Command and wait for orders. That could take weeks, maybe months. By then, whoever these Zelani were, they would probably all be dead or enslaved. Set course for Kepler 442b, she said finally. Maximum sustainable speed. Sarah looked surprised. Captain, we do not have authorization to enter that sector. Command will want to know why we are leaving our patrol zone. Then we better call them and explain, Lisa replied. She turned to Jake. Get me Admiral Brooks on priority channel. Tell her it is urgent. While Jake worked to establish the connection, Lisa walked back to her command chair and sat down. She had served under Admiral Brooks for 3 years and she knew the Admiral well enough to predict her reaction. Brooks was a career officer who followed regulations, but she was also someone who understood that sometimes the right thing to do was not the same as the safe thing to do. The main screen flickered and Admiral Brooks appeared, sitting behind her desk at Luna Command. Patricia Brooks was in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in more battles than most officers ever saw, and her reputation for fairness was matched only by her reputation for toughness. Captain Morgan, the Admiral said without preamble. I understand you have something urgent to discuss. Yes, ma'am, Lisa replied. She had Jake replay the alien message, watching Brooks's face as the desperate plea filled the communication channel. When it ended, the Admiral was quiet for several seconds. Captain, what is your current position and status? We are en route to the Kepler system, ma'am. ETA is 13 days at current speed. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You are already en route? Before getting authorization? Lisa felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. Yes, ma'am. The situation seemed time-critical. Indeed it does. Brooks leaned back in her chair and Lisa could see her thinking. Captain, you realize that entering Vorthon space without authorization could be considered an act of war? The Kepler system is not officially Vorthon space, Admiral. It is listed as independent territory in our databases. Listed as independent, but obviously under Vorthon control. Brooks was quiet again, then leaned forward. Captain, I am going to ask you a direct question and I want a direct answer. Do you believe this message is genuine? Lisa thought about the voice they had heard, the exhaustion and desperation that no actor could fake. Yes, ma'am, I do. And, do you believe we should respond to it? This was the moment that would define Lisa's career. She could play it safe, follow regulations, and let someone else make the hard decisions. Or she could do what she knew was right regardless of the consequences. Admiral, if we do nothing, an entire civilization dies. If we act, we might save them. I know what I would want someone to do if it was Earth calling for help. Brooks nodded, slowly. I agree, Captain, but this is bigger than one ship. Stand by for new orders. The connection ended, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts and her crew. She looked around the bridge at the faces of people who had trusted her judgment enough to follow her into unknown space. Jake was already calculating jump coordinates. Sarah was reviewing tactical data about Vorthan ship designs. Everyone was preparing for whatever came next. 2 hours later, the communication system chimed with an incoming message from Fleet Command. Admiral Brooks appeared on screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her, Lisa could see other admirals and what looked like government officials. "Captain Morgan," Brooks began, "after discussion with the Defense Council, we have decided to authorize Operation Rescue Dawn. You will be joined by the cruiser New York and the destroyer Atlanta. Additional ships are being prepared, but your task force will be the advance group." Lisa felt relief wash over her. "What are our rules of engagement, Admiral?" "You are authorized to use all necessary force to protect civilian populations from acts of genocide and slavery. You are not authorized to engage in territorial conquest or to initiate hostilities. But Captain," Brooks's voice grew harder, "if the Vorthans fire first, you have full authority to fire back." "Understood, Admiral." "There is one more thing, Lisa." The Admiral's use of her first name got everyone's attention. The President himself approved this mission. He said that if humanity is going to be known across the galaxy, we better make sure we are known for the right reasons. After the communication ended, Lisa stood up and addressed her crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to make first contact with an alien species. They called for help, and we are going to give it to them. This is not about politics or territory, or trade agreements. This is about showing the galaxy what humans do when innocents are in danger." The bridge crew nodded, their faces serious but determined. These were people who had joined the military to protect others, and now they had the chance to do exactly that on a scale none of them had ever imagined. As the Valiant raced toward the Kepler system, its crew prepared for whatever they might find there. Behind them, more ships were being readied to follow. The age of human expansion was about to begin, not with conquest, but with compassion backed by the strength to make it meaningful. The Deathworlders were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The UES Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and what Captain Lisa Morgan saw on her screens made her blood run cold. The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast their light on a scene of systematic destruction that reminded her of the worst atrocities from Earth's own history. Massive Vorthon dreadnoughts hung in orbit around the planet like black metal vultures. Each ship was 3 times the size of the Valiant, bristling with weapons and armored in thick plating that gleamed dully in the starlight. Between the larger warships, dozens of smaller vessels moved in precise formations, ferrying cargo containers from the planet's surface to huge processing stations. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis from her position at the tactical station. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake Thompson ran the sensor data through the computer. "I count 27 major warships and maybe 60 smaller craft. Captain, they have us outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Lisa stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The New York and Atlanta would not arrive for another 6 hours. Even with 3 ships, they would still be facing impossible odds if it came to a direct fight. "What about the planet?" she asked. Sarah worked her controls, trying to penetrate the interference from all the Vorthon ships. "I am reading massive energy signatures from the surface. It looks like they have set up mining operations across multiple continents. There are also what appear to be large detention facilities." Lisa felt sick. The alien who had sent the message had called them labor camps. Now she was seeing the proof of what that meant. "Captain," Jake said urgently, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet. Same frequency as the original distress call. Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal the same weary voice they had heard before. But this time, Elder Kale sounded even more desperate. "Unknown ships at the system edge. This is Elder Kale of the Zelani Resistance. If you are the humans we called for, please be careful. The Vorthans have detection grids throughout the system. They shoot down any ship that approaches the planet without their permission." Lisa looked at Jake and nodded. He opened a channel. In response, "Elder Kale, This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the Earthship Valiant. We received your message and we are here to help. Can you tell us about Vorthan patrol patterns and defensive positions? There was a long pause. Then Kale's voice came back filled with something that might have been hope. You came. You actually came. Captain Morgan, I am transmitting what little information our scouts have gathered. But you must know there are millions of my people in their camps. They use us as shields whenever anyone tries to resist. The data package that came through painted a grim picture. The Vorthons had built their base camps close to major population centers, making it impossible to attack the military targets without risking civilian casualties. It was a tactic designed to paralyze any rescue attempt. Elder, Lisa said carefully, we need to know more about your people. Are there any who could help us fight if we could get weapons to them? Another pause. Captain, we are not warriors. We have never been warriors. Our entire civilization is built on peaceful cooperation. Most of my people do not even understand the concept of violence as a solution to problems. Sarah looked up from her station with a troubled expression. Captain, how do we fight an enemy who uses civilians as human shields when the civilians do not know how to help themselves? It was a question that had no easy answers. Lisa had studied military history, and she knew that the hardest battles were always the ones where saving people was more important than destroying targets. We get creative, she said finally. Jake, can you establish a secure communication link with the Resistance? I want to talk to them about what they can do. While Jake worked on the communication setup, Lisa studied the tactical data. The Vorthon ships moved in predictable patterns, following standard patrol routes that had probably worked for them on dozens of other worlds. They were confident, maybe overconfident, in their superiority. The communication link established, and Lisa found herself talking to a group of aliens who sounded nothing like the warriors of human legend. Elder Kale was there, along with several others whose voices shook with fear and exhaustion. Elder, I need to ask you some difficult questions, Lisa began. How many of your people are free and able to move around the planet? Perhaps 3,000, scattered in small groups across the continents, Kale replied. We hide in caves, ruins, places the Vorthans do not think to look. Can you coordinate with each other? Pass messages between groups? Yes, we have maintained communication networks. We are good with technology, even if we are not good with fighting. Lisa felt the first spark of an idea forming in her mind. Elder, what if fighting was not necessary? What if we could get your people out of the camps without firing a shot? There was excitement in Kale's voice when he answered. Captain, if you could do such a thing, it would be a miracle. But how? By giving the Vorthons something else to worry about, Lisa said. She turned to Sarah. How long would it take to reach the outer asteroid belt without being detected? Sarah checked her navigation charts. Maybe 4 hours if we stay on the far side of the system and use the gas giant to mask our approach. Lisa nodded. Elder, I am going to need your people to do something that might seem strange. Can your free groups get close to the Vorten? Communication arrays without being seen? Some of them, yes. We know the land better than they do. Good. In exactly 8 hours, I want every group that can reach a communication array to create a massive system failure. Cut cables, overload power systems, create as much chaos as possible in their communications network. Kyle sounded uncertain. Captain, that will only anger them. They will punish the prisoners in the camps. Not if they are too busy dealing with something bigger, Lisa replied. Trust me, Elder, we are going to give them problems they have never had to handle before. Over the next few hours, Lisa worked with her crew to develop what she privately called the most insane rescue plan in military history. It relied on the Vorthons being exactly what they appeared to be, bullies who were used to picking on people who could not fight back. The key was the asteroid belt. Like most systems, Kepler had a ring of rocky debris orbiting beyond the main planets. Most of it was small stuff, but the sensors had identified several asteroids large enough to cause serious damage if they moved fast enough. You want to do what? Sarah asked when Lisa explained the plan. We are going to play pool with asteroids, Lisa said calmly. Pick the right ones, give them the right push, and send them toward the planet on a collision course. Jake looked up from his calculations. Captain, the Vorthons will detect incoming asteroids hours before impact. They will just shoot them down with their orbital weapons. Exactly, Lisa smiled. They will have to choose between shooting at rocks or shooting at us. And while they are busy with target practice, we are going to be doing the real work. Your plan was simple in concept but required precise timing. The Valiant would nudge several large asteroids toward the planet, creating obvious threats that the Vorthon fleet would have to address. At the same time, the Zelani resistance would cripple the ground-based communication systems. In the confusion that followed, Lisa hoped to get close enough to the detention camps to begin extracting prisoners. It was not a perfect plan. There were dozens of things that could go wrong, and the odds were still heavily against them. But it was a plan that played to human strengths: adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to take risks that seemed impossible to other species. Elder, Lisa said over the communication link, are your people ready? As ready as we can be, Captain. We trust you. Lisa looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were people who had signed up to protect human colonies, not to rescue alien civilians from an enemy they had never fought before, but every one of them looked determined to see this through. All right, people, she said. Let us show the galaxy what humans do when someone asks for help. Helm, take us to the asteroid belt. Communications, signal the New York and Atlanta to maintain position at the system edge until we call for them. Today we are going to teach some bullies what happens when they pick on the wrong neighborhood. The asteroid belt of the Kepler system was a graveyard of ancient rock and ice, spinning silently in the darkness between the outer planets. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching her crew work with the focused intensity of people who knew that lives depended on their precision. Target asteroid is in position, Captain, reported Ensign Tom Bradley from the navigation station. Mass approximately 2 million tons. Current trajectory will bring it within range of our propulsion systems in 15 minutes. Lisa nodded and turned to her tactical officer. Sarah, are the charges ready? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis checked her weapons console. All torpedo tubes loaded with low-yield nuclear charges. We can nudge 3 asteroids toward the planet before the Vorthons detect what we are doing. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The Valiant would use small nuclear explosions to alter the course of several large asteroids, sending them toward Kepler 442b on trajectories that would look like natural orbital decay. The Vorthons would have no choice but to destroy the incoming rocks with their orbital defense systems. While they were busy playing cosmic target practice, the real rescue would begin. Communication status? Lisa asked. Jake Thompson adjusted his headset. Still in contact with Elder Kale and the resistance groups, they are in position near the communication arrays across the planet, waiting for your signal. Lisa looked at the chronometer on her command chair. Everything had to happen at exactly the right time, or the plan would fall apart. Too early, and the Vorthons would have time to respond to multiple threats. Too late, and the resistance fighters would be caught in the open when the orbital bombardment began. First asteroid in range, Tom announced. Fire, Lisa ordered. The Valiant shuddered slightly as the torpedo launched. On the main screen, they watched the small nuclear explosion bloom like a brief star against the dark rock. The asteroid, which had been drifting slowly through space for millions of years, suddenly gained new purpose and direction. Good hit, Sarah reported. Asteroid is now on a collision course with the planet. Impact in approximately 4 hours. They repeated the process twice more, sending 3 massive rocks tumbling toward the world below. Each asteroid was large enough to cause significant damage if it reached the surface, but they were not really meant to hit the planet. They were meant to be seen and stopped. All asteroids away, Sarah announced. The Vorthons will detect them in about 2 hours. Lisa opened the communication channel to the planet. Elder Kale, this is Captain Morgan. Are your people ready? The alien's voice came back immediately, tense with nervous energy. We are ready, Captain. But I must ask again, are you certain this will work? No, Lisa said honestly. But it is the best chance we have. Remember, when I give the signal, your people have exactly 30 minutes to disable as many communication systems as possible. After that, They need to get clear and stay hidden. Understood. Captain, may I ask what happens if your plan does not work? Lisa looked around her bridge at the determined faces of her crew. Then we improvise, Elder. That is what humans do. The next 2 hours passed slowly. The Valiant maintained position in the asteroid belt, using the rocky debris to hide from Vorthan sensors. On the planet below, the Resistance fighters moved quietly through the ruins of their civilization, carrying the simple tools and explosives they would need to cripple the invaders' communication network. Finally, Jake looked up from his sensor, stationed with excitement in his voice. Captain, I am reading activity in the Vorthan fleet. Looks like they just detected the first asteroid. On the tactical display, the neat formations of enemy ships began to shift. The massive dreadnoughts moved into defensive positions, while smaller vessels broke away to intercept the incoming threats. It was exactly what Lisa had hoped for. Signal the Resistance, she ordered. Go, go, go! Across the planet, 3,000. Zelani civilians turned into saboteurs. They were not warriors, had never wanted to be warriors, but desperation and hope gave them courage they did not know they possessed. In the smoking ruins of crystal cities, small groups of aliens crawled through ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels, reaching the communication arrays that kept the Vorthan occupation running smoothly. Elder Kale led one such group through the basement of what had once been the central library. His old hands shook as he attached the explosive charges that a human resistance manual, transmitted by the Valiant, had taught him to make from common chemicals. Elder, whispered Nira. Beside him, the guards will return soon. Kale nodded and activated the timer. Then we had better move quickly. All across the planet, similar scenes played out. The Zelani had spent their lives building and creating. Now they were learning to destroy, and they were good at it. Within minutes, communication arrays began failing across multiple continents. In orbit, War Commander Thek stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his orderly conquest descend into chaos. The asteroid threats were bad enough, requiring him to redirect significant firepower to deal with incoming rocks. But now his ground forces were reporting communication failures across the entire planet. How many sites are affected? He demanded. His communications officer, a nervous young Vorthan named Grix, checked his displays with growing alarm. Sir, we have lost contact with 60% of our ground stations. The failures appear to be coordinated attacks. Thex's clawed hands clenched into fists. Impossible. The Zelani are passive creatures. They do not have the knowledge or courage for such coordinated resistance. Sir, the first asteroid will reach firing range in 30 minutes. Should we continue investigating the communication failures, or focus on the orbital defense? It was exactly the choice Lisa had hoped to force him to make. Thex could not do both effectively, and every minute he spent trying to decide was a minute the Resistance could use to cause more damage. Destroy the asteroids first, Thex ordered. Then we will deal with the sabotage. That decision gave the Valiant the opening it needed. While the Vorthan fleet focused their attention and firepower on the incoming rocks, Lisa brought her ship out of hiding and began the most dangerous part of the plan. Take us in, Tom, she ordered. Keep us in the sensor shadow of the largest asteroid as long as possible. The Valiant accelerated toward the planet, using the bulk of the 2-million-ton rock to hide from enemy sensors. It was a dangerous game of hide-and-seek, played at speeds that left no room for error. Reading massive energy discharges from the Vorthan fleet, Sarah reported. They are engaging the asteroids with everything they have. On the main screen, they could see the space around the planet lighting up with weapons fire. Massive energy, beams and torpedo explosions turned the incoming asteroids into clouds of glowing debris. The Vorthans were efficient and thorough, destroying each threat before it could reach the surface. But while they were busy shooting at rocks, they were not watching for a single small ship diving toward the planet under cover of the chaos. We are through their outer sensor grid, Jake announced. No signs that they have detected us. Lisa felt the first real hope she had experienced since arriving in the system. Take us to the first detention camp. Sarah, prepare boarding parties. We are going to get as many people out as we can before they realize what we are doing. The Geo. Valiant streaked through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b, its hull glowing from the heat of entry. Below them, the planet showed the scars of Vorthon occupation. Massive strip mines carved ugly wounds in the landscape, while the geometric patterns of detention camps sprawled across areas that had once been forests and farmland. First camp in sight, Tom reported, reading approximately 10,000 life signs inside the perimeter. Lisa stared at the camp on her screen. It was surrounded by high walls and guard towers, designed to keep prisoners in and rescuers out. But the designers had never planned for someone crazy enough to land a starship in the middle of it. Put us down right in the center of the compound, she ordered. Maximum shock and confusion. Show these bullies what happens when humans come calling. The UES Valiant dropped through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b like a falling star, its engines screaming as Tom Bradley fought to control their descent. The detention camp grew larger on the main screen until individual buildings and guard towers became visible. Captain Lisa Morgan gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered from atmospheric entry. Touchdown in 30 seconds, Tom announced, his voice steady despite the violent shaking. Hope everyone remembered to buckle up. The Valiant hit the ground in the center of the camp with a thunderous crash that shook the earth for miles around. Dust and debris flew in all directions as the ship's landing struts dug deep furrows in the packed dirt. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the facility as Vorthon guards stumbled out of their barracks, confused and disoriented. Lisa was already on her feet before the ship stopped moving. Sarah, deploy all security teams. Jake, start broadcasting surrender demands in Vorthon. Tell them we have the camp surrounded and they have 60 seconds to lay down their weapons. It was a complete bluff. The Valiant carried maybe 40 security personnel against a camp with several hundred guards. But Lisa was counting on shock and confusion to level the odds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis led the first wave of Marines down the ship's ramps, their weapons ready and their movements sharp and professional. The Vorthon guards had never seen humans before, but they had heard the stories. Beings from a death world, evolved from predators, trained from birth for violence. The first Vorthon guard to see Sarah's team dropped his weapon and ran. The second one tried to raise his rifle, but Sarah's squad moved like a pack of wolves, faster and more coordinated than anything the guards had ever faced. Within minutes, the camp's command center was under human control. But Lisa's real attention was on the prisoners. Thousands of Zelani huddled in the camp's barracks, their natural glow dimmed by months of captivity and poor treatment. Many were sick. All were frightened, and none of them understood what was happening. Elder Kale's voice came over the ship's communication system, speaking in the Zelani language to calm his people. Do not be afraid. The humans have come. The Deathworlders are here to take us home. The evacuation began immediately. Human medical. Teams moved through the barracks, treating the wounded and identifying those too sick to move quickly. Engineering crews rigged temporary shelters around the Valiant's cargo bays, creating space for thousands of refugees. Captain, Jake reported from his station, I am reading massive activity from the Vorthon fleet. They have finished destroying the asteroids and they are starting to wonder where we went. Lisa nodded grimly. She had known this moment would come. The diversion had bought them time, but not much. Soon the Vorthons would realize what had happened and come looking for them. How long do we need to evacuate this camp? She asked. Sarah's voice came over the intercom from somewhere in the camp. At least 2 hours to get everyone aboard safely, maybe 3 if we want to do it without casualties. We do not have 3 hours, Lisa replied. Jake, signal the New York and Atlanta. Tell them we need immediate assistance. Even as she gave the order, Lisa knew it might not be enough. The 2 ships racing toward them would help, but they were still outnumbered by the Vorthon fleet. What they needed was something the enemy would not expect. That was when Elder Kale appeared on the bridge, escorted by one of Sarah's Marines. The old Zelani looked around the human starship with wonder in his large eyes, his skin patterns flickering with amazement and gratitude. Captain Morgan, he said, his voice trembling with emotion, my people call you the Miracle Bringer. How can we ever repay such kindness? Lisa studied the alien leader for a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. Elder, how many of your people are still free on this planet? Perhaps 2,000 scattered in hiding places across the world. Why do you ask? Because we cannot evacuate everyone from just this camp, let alone all the camps on the planet. But your people know this world better than the Vorthans do. If we can give you weapons and training, can you fight to free the other camps? Kale's patterns flickered with uncertainty. Captain, I told you before, we are not warriors, we do not know how to fight. Then we will teach you, Lisa said firmly. The universe is full of bullies like the Vorthans. If your people want to stay free, you will need to learn to defend yourselves. What followed was the strangest military training session in galactic history. Human Marines spread across the camp, teaching peaceful aliens how to use weapons and basic military tactics. The Zelani were quick learners, their natural intelligence adapting rapidly to concepts they had never needed before. Meanwhile, the evacuation continued. Thousands of prisoners were loaded aboard the Valiant, and temporary shelters were erected around the landing site. Human medical teams worked around the clock to treat the sick and wounded, but time was running out. The Vorthon fleet had finally realized that the asteroid attack was a diversion and began searching for the real threat. It would not take them long to find a human starship sitting in the middle of one of their prison camps. Contact bearing down from orbit, Jake announced. 3 Vorthon destroyers, ETA 15 minutes. Lisa looked around the camp at the thousands of aliens who were finally free but not yet safe. They needed more time, and there was only one way to get it. Elder, she said to Kale, are your people ready to fight for their freedom? The old alien looked at his fellow Zelani, many now holding human weapons and wearing determined expressions that had never been seen on their faces before. Yes, Captain, we are ready. Lisa activated the ship's communication system. Attention Vorthon vessels, this is Captain Lisa Morgan of the United Earth ship Valiant. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately and cease all hostile actions against the Zelani people. The response came quickly, filled with arrogant fury. Human ship, you are trespassing in Vorthon space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Lisa smiled coldly. Vorthon Commander, you picked the wrong species to threaten. We are humans from Earth, and we do not surrender. We do not retreat, and we do not abandon people who asked for our help. The battle that followed would be remembered throughout the galaxy as the day the Deathworlders announced their presence to the universe. The Valiant, supported by the arriving New York and Atlanta, fought a running battle with the Vorthon fleet while the evacuation continued below. But the real surprise came when the newly armed Zelani resistance launched coordinated attacks on Vorthon installations across the planet. Aliens who had been pacifists for thousands of years proved that desperation and proper training could turn anyone into effective fighters. War Commander Thex watched his perfect conquest fall apart around him. His communication networks were down. His ground forces were under attack from enemies who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. And now 3 human warships were teaching his fleet what real space combat looked like. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we are receiving surrender demands from 17 different detention camps. The prisoners have somehow armed themselves and taken control. Thex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than 6 hours, his entire occupation force had been destroyed by a handful of human ships and a bunch of civilian aliens who were not supposed to know how to fight. How is this possible? He demanded. His communications officer looked up nervously. Sir, I am monitoring human tactical communications. They appear to be teaching the local population military tactics in real time. The humans are not just fighting us themselves. They are teaching others how to fight us. For the first time in his military career, Thex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of an enemy that could turn victims into warriors just by showing up. The evacuation of Kepler 442b took 3 days. When it was over, every Vorthon soldier and ship had been driven from the system. The surviving Zelani had their world back, along with weapons, training, and most importantly, the knowledge that they could defend themselves. Elder Kale stood with Captain Morgan in the ruins of what had once been the Central Library. Around them, Zelani workers were already beginning the process of rebuilding, but this time they included defensive positions and military installations in their plans. "Captain," Kale said, his patterns glowing bright with hope for the first time in months, "what happens now? Will you stay to help us rebuild?" Lisa shook her head. "You do not need us for that, Elder. You never did. You just needed to remember that sometimes peace has to be defended with strength." She looked up at the stars where other worlds might be sending out desperate messages into the void. "Besides, we have work to do. Word is getting out across the galaxy about what happened here. I have a feeling we are going to be getting more calls for help." As the human ships prepared to leave, they left behind more than just weapons and training. They left behind hope. Hope that the galaxy did not have to be ruled by the strongest and most ruthless. Hope that somewhere among the stars, there were warriors who would come when the innocent called for aid. The age of human intervention had begun, and the universe would never be the same.